week, this test will have an essay. And this is where your essay starts, right here, with the 5 basic principles of the U.S. Constitution. Okay? This is not that difficult. Okay? So some of these are common sense. Some of these you already know a lot about. Okay? And some will be relatively new, but nothing totally new that you haven't been exposed to before, just based on what we've talked about in this class thus far and what you've learned about in school over your lifetime. Okay? So 5 basic principles. So when you're writing this essay, this is going to be your first body paragraph. Okay? This is the text of the actual Constitution. Okay? There are 7 articles in the Constitution. Okay? The first 3 are the 3 branches that we talked about. But what it establishes, guys, is a government of the people. Okay? It starts with "we the people" in the preamble. Okay? So government's authority comes from the people. This is our social contract. This popular sovereignty can be found throughout the Constitution, where people get to elect their leaders, right? We're the ones that establish this government. So, oh, mouse, where you at? Okay. So, and there's rules for election of government officials. Okay. Right now, in the House and Senate, 2021 currently, they are trying to pass some laws about federal elections. Okay. We saw a lot of angst and confusion over the last election. What makes this process interesting when we talk about our election, our rules for election government officials, generally those are controlled by the states. Okay, the states run the federal elections. So you have 50 different systems electing people to the same body, which is good, but it also has some negative sides as well. Okay. And then we get to elect people that represent us. This is our Republican form of government. Right. So it lays out, the Constitution lays out a government by the people, okay, and establishes the rules for how that is done. Okay. Pretty simple, right? I mean, I think that's all I have right there. That's pretty simple. So that's a short paragraph, right? I mean, you don't have a lot to write about there. Okay? So, I mean, your essay is not going to be 3 pages long. It might be 2. 1.5. Something like that. Okay. All right. Moving forward. Okay, this is something we get from the British. This goes back to the Magna Carta, okay? And that is limited government, okay? If a government is unlimited in power, can it truly serve the people? No. Okay, so we have to place limits on it. And that's exactly what the Constitution does. It gives what powers to the national government has, those powers it doesn't have, it doesn't have. So Article 1, Section 9 says Congress Congress is expressly forbidden to do the following. There's a whole section on things the national government's not allowed to do. It cannot prohibit the importation of slaves or migration before 1808. That's something we talked about in the last chapter, 1808. They cannot suspend habeas corpus except during rebellion or invasion. They cannot pass bills of attainder or ex post facto laws. Okay, a bill of attainder would be like charge you with a crime that doesn't exist, for violating a law that doesn't exist. They can't do that, okay? An ex post facto law is a law that, okay, so today it's legal to smoke cigarettes at 21. Tomorrow they pass a law that says you can't smoke cigarettes until you're 22. Can they fine you for what you did yesterday when it wasn't a law, right? So that's an ex post facto law. That prevents government from making laws to go after people for something they did prior to the law being passed. Does that make sense? You can't do that. Okay, there's all kinds of stuff in here. Pass head tax unless it is proportional to the census. Okay, that's population. Lay a tax or duty on exports from any state. Make laws concerning trade in favor of one state over another, so they can't favor one state over another. Spend government money without the consent of Congress. You grant titles of nobility, which I have up here. Okay, so there's a whole list of limits, powers that they can't do. Okay, and as we know with the Bill of Rights, those are protections that we have from government. Okay, so they cannot violate our First, Second, Third, Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, Seventh, Eighth Amendment. Okay, limited government. The third, so I mean, you can write a little bit about that. That's a pretty short paragraph as well. We are going to have some longer paragraphs. Okay. And the next one is separation of powers. Now, based on your long answers, guys, I feel like there's a few people that still don't get the gist, the layout of our government. Okay, so I think, you remember that day when I wrote up the 3 branches of government on the board, and I said, write that in your notes or put it on the inside of your notes or somewhere you can find it. I think you might need to look at that again, but this will help. Going back over this will help. Okay. So the powers, separation of powers is different than checks and balances. Okay, we all know what checks and balances are, right? When you stop another branch from doing something. But this is different. So each branch has specific roles that only they can do. Okay? This makes sure that no branch has too much power. These powers are listed in the first 3 articles of the Constitution. Article 1 lays out the legislative branch, Article 2, the executive branch, and Article 3, the judicial branch. And then I think I break this out in the next slide. Okay. Some of you guys go to the basketball game? It's good to see a student section again. Everybody having fun. I think we had more than 400 people in there. Saw a few of your parents, not very many in here. Over parent-teacher conferences. Okay. All right, yeah, so we're still in separation of powers, okay? So this is going to be a little bit longer paragraph, okay? So we start with the legislative branch, and this is stuff like we've already talked about, but let's go back over it, okay? So Article 1 is the legislative branch. We know this, you just wrote about it on the last test, on the Great Compromise, right? So you have a bicameral Congress or legislature that makes the laws. L legislature, L, laws. Okay? Now, the House, we know, is based on population. The Senate, each state gets 2, but they also have special powers within each of them. Okay? And guys, when we get to chapter 5, we will look at a lot closer the different special powers that they have in the House and the Senate. Okay? We're just going to kind of touch on a couple today. Okay? So anytime the government's the government's going to spend your money, you're going to tax you or spend your money, it has to start in the House of Representatives. So that means most bills do start in the House of Representatives, because most bills do spend money or tax you. Okay. And the Senate has this role described in the Constitution as advise and consent. They advise the executive and consent to his appointments and his treaties, the president. Okay. So you guys probably remember, like, when a Supreme Court, when the president, okay, or the executive, the same thing, okay, the chief executive, when they appoint a federal judge or a cabinet member, like the Secretary of State, that has to be approved by the Senate. And with treaties, guys, the founders in the Constitution put a high threshold on that. So, like, if you want to make a treaty with another country or several countries, you got to get 2/3 of the Senate to approve. That's 67 votes out of 100. It's hard to get that. They did that for a reason. But George Washington really warned us. He said, be careful of entangling alliances. Okay, because if you get in an alliance with countries, you guys remember studying NATO? Did you get to that last semester? The North Atlantic Treaty Organization? Shucks. You remember it? Blake, you don't remember that either? No. Shoot. Every American should know about NATO. Okay, so here we go. Let me, okay. Over here, these green countries, and then you find them over in Europe. This is right after World War II, right? So we defeated the Nazis, we defeated the Japanese, the Italians, got them out, okay? And then coming out of World War II, you had 2 superpowers, right? 2 superpowers. United States and who? The Soviet Union, okay? And so we wanted to prevent communism from spreading after World War II. Does that make sense? Okay, so the communists were trying to spread into Europe, and they did. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Yugoslavia. All of these, there's about 8 or 9 of them that were under communism. West Germany, or East Germany, okay? And then they tried to spread over here in the Far East, right? In places like Korea and Vietnam, all right? And I know that was like you were in a hurry to get that done. So we started NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And basically it's about 25 countries in it, U.S., Canada, and then the rest are like European countries. Okay, so you've got Britain, France, Spain, Germany, Poland, Italy. All these countries are part of a defensive alliance. Okay, Belgium, Netherlands. If any of these countries are attacked, it's an attack on all of them. So we have to go to war. You understand? So what we're doing is we are putting the decision of whether we go to war or not in Congress's hands, which is where it belongs in the Constitution. We are putting that decision in the hands of the Soviet Union at the time. If Soviet Union attacks one of those countries, we have to go to war. That's an alliance, a military alliance, you understand? And we're still under that obligation as we speak today. It's worked very well. I mean, NATO has prevented a third world war. Okay, so some treaties are good, and some may not be so good. So that's why they put such a high threshold. So you remember maybe after World War I, the Treaty of Versailles? You've all heard of that. That was signed after World War I. We did not join. The Senate voted 82 to 13, no. Now, after World War II, we joined NATO and we joined the United Nations after World War II. So you had a change in thinking, okay? But you have to be careful about these treaties. All right, so it takes a 2/3 majority to get that done. All right. All right, so that's the legislative branch. They make the laws. Okay, they do have more roles than that, but okay. All right, so can the president make laws? No. He doesn't have that power. Can the judicial branch make laws? No, they don't have. They have separate powers. You follow me? That's what we're doing here. Okay, so there's, of course, the White House. Okay, the executive branch. Okay, what powers does the president have? Under the Article 2 of the Constitution. So when we look at the makeup of this body, obviously the president's at the top, okay? You've got the vice president that really has no power. Okay, their main role is to be there in case something happens to the president, okay? Now, some vice presidents have more power because the president chooses to let them do some stuff, okay? And in some cases, they don't want them to do anything. And then your executive departments, which is your cabinet. Okay. And I think they're pretty much, they're close to being done with Joe Biden's cabinet. Okay. I've got some new names to learn, like the new Secretary of Defense, the new Secretary of State, Treasury Secretary, all these. They're all new people. Okay. 15 new people. Now, in here, it lays out the power to carry out the law. So Congress passes them. Okay. So let's just say there's a law that says Congress passes a law that there needs to be a sign wherever railroads intersect with roads. Okay. So Congress passes that law. There needs to be a warning at every intersection where there's a railroad crossing. So it's up to the executive branch, probably the Department of Transportation, to carry that out. So they'll figure out how many cars have to pass through a railroad intersection before you put up one of those gates, you know, the one that comes down, ding, 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 and you get a gate. So they say, okay, if more than 500 cars pass through that intersection a day, you're going to have a gate. Okay. If it's fewer than that, you can do just the sign that goes ding, 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 no gate. Okay, and if it's like less than 10 cars a day, just have a sign. It says, hey, heads up, you're about to cross the railroad. Look both ways. Right? Or the school bus stopping, right? That's, you know, I don't know if that's a state law or federal law or what, you know what I mean? But it's up to the executive branch to carry that out. As I said, most laws we live under are state laws. Okay, so that would be the governor doing it. Yes? Okay, the president also serves as commander-in-chief of the armed forces. We'll get into more on that in chapter 6. Okay, and directs relations with foreign nations. So President Biden is kind of the head of the foreign policy. And if he wants to do a treaty, he's got to get the Senate on board. Okay? There are some things the president that we'll learn about can do that fall short, like executive orders and executive agreements, but we'll have to wait on that till chapter 6. Okay? I don't want to get into too much here. I don't want to bog you down and confuse you here, okay? So to carry out the law, so execute the law. So L, legislature, L, laws, execute, executive, execute the law, right? Okay, this is easy to remember. And then there's the judicial branch. I need to update my my picture here. I think I have on the judicial on when we get to chapter 7. Okay, there are 9 justices on the Supreme Court. This is the only court that is mentioned in the Constitution is the Supreme Court. Okay, and their job is to interpret the law. You guys know who this was? RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She passed away a few months ago. And she was replaced by, my mind's not really functioning this morning. Anybody remember?
Is it Amy?
Yeah, Amy Coney Barrett. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so woman got replaced by woman. Although Barrett is Catholic and Ruth Bader Ginsburg was Jewish. So. Interesting fact. Every member of the Supreme Court is either Catholic or Jewish. There's no Protestants on the Supreme Court. For like the first 200 years, they were all Protestants. And now there's none. Okay? It's interesting. Okay, so all other courts, federal courts, I'm going to show you a slide here in a second. All other federal courts were established by Congress. Okay, so as Congress creates these courts, they can also take them away. But they set up the federal court system. And then at the state level, guys, we all set up our own courts. Okay, we'll talk about states in chapter 4 when we talk about federalism. Okay, so yeah, this is the only court that's mentioned. So when you look at the courts, okay, the federal courts, I'll get into this in greater detail right before you graduate. Okay, but you got Supreme Court, and then we have 13 courts of appeals geographically distributed across the country. Kansas is in the 10th Circuit. Okay, so our appellate court is actually in Denver. Kansas is in the 10th with several other states. It's in Denver. Okay, in California and Washington, Oregon are part of the 9th Circuit, which is in San Francisco. And then they have one that's in Washington, D.C., the federal circuit. Okay. From there, you have 94 district courts. Okay. We have one in Wichita, federal district court. And these are the trial courts for federal crimes. So you rob a bank, okay, you're going to go to a district court. It's a federal crime, okay, you go here. All right. And then these are some special courts that are created by Congress later on, military courts, veterans appeals, tax court, and like stuff that happens in open water, you know, out in the ocean, international waters and stuff like that. That's special courts for that stuff. Okay. You don't need to know this for the test. Okay. Not yet. We don't need to know this. I was just kind of showing you. And then this one here, this is your 13 courts of appeals, your 94. This is federal courts here. These are state courts. Okay, so we have a state Supreme Court. All 50 states have a state Supreme Court. All states have state appeals courts. Like if you don't like you found guilty, you want to appeal to a higher court, you can do that here. This is where you get found guilty. Okay, down here or innocent, and you can appeal that decision here, and then you can appeal that decision here, and then you can appeal that decision here. You can't appeal from here to here or to here. You can't go from here to here. You got to go from here to here, or here, here. Okay. You can't just, appeal your traffic fine to the U.S. Supreme Court. You got to go through the steps. All right, so that's checks and balances. So we've done popular sovereignty, limited government, and separation of powers, right? Separation of powers, okay? The fourth basic principle is checks and balances. This is where they give one branch of government the power to restrain, okay? This is the key word, guys. On the test, you're going to be looking at fill in the blank, multiple choice, and so forth. You're looking for this word right here, restraint, okay? Separation of powers and checks and balances are different. Powers, each branch has a separation of powers. This is the power to check or restrain the other two branches, okay? And this is, more of this than you realize. I'm going to put up a map here in a minute on the next slide that shows you all the checks and balances, okay? And you probably know most of them already, okay? So the executive checks the legislature. How can the president check Congress? What's one thing the president can do? Veto, right? Everybody knows that. Now, can Congress override that veto? Yes. With a 2/3 majority in both houses, they can override the veto. Okay? Let me give you one example. George W. Bush, Texas. George W. Bush vetoed 2 pieces of legislation in 8 years. That's it. Never saw a spending bill he didn't like. That's why the national debt went up under W. Bush. Okay, he said, you guys are spending too much money here. Veto. Take it back. Take some of this crap out we don't need and bring it back to me. One of his vetoes was over government funding of embryonic stem cell research. You guys heard of this? Stem cell research, embryonic stem cell research, which would be using oftentimes aborted babies to do this research with. Yes? And Bush said, no. You're not going to use these people that are pro-life, their tax dollars, to do this research. I mean, I don't want my tax dollars to be used for that. And so Bush stood up for those that believed in life and said, no, this research is legal. You can do it, but the taxpayer shouldn't pay for it. You follow me? Congress overrode that. 2/3 majority in both houses. Okay. Now, as you guys probably know, hopefully you know this, embryonic stem cell research has shown that there are other ways and probably more effective ways to use stem cells than from embryos. You can use the umbilical cord, the placenta, you can use healthy adult stem cells, okay? The idea with embryonic stem cells was that they were still like blank slates. They could grow into any type of stem cell for the pancreas or the liver or the heart or what have you, okay? And that did not really bear fruit, okay? So there's better ways to do it. But that's just a good example of how that situation could play out, okay? So this forces the legislative branch to think what the president's going to do with this, right? Should we pass this even though the president has threatened to veto? Well, that's going to cause gridlock, which is not that big of a deal, okay? But they may want to think about what the president's going to do before they pass something, okay? Because if the president doesn't like it, he may veto it. This encourages the two to work together, okay? Now, obviously, you have the Democrats controlling both houses and the presidency, so they're probably working in close contact with each other. Okay. This is just what I said, right? The president's power is limited there. He can veto, but they can override it with 2/3 in both houses. So in your essay, you're going to need to provide some examples, okay, of checks and balances. And I got a whole bunch of them you can pick from. You don't have to list them all. And these I already talked about today, okay? So only Congress can spend money, okay? The president can't just spend money without Congress approving it, okay? And then the Senate can reject presidential appointments. We just talked about that. With federal judges, cabinets, and then the treaties, okay? 2/3. Both house, or of the Senate, excuse me. That's the Senate's role of advising consent. When you're done with that, I'm just going to put up this last map. It's a really good diagram of checks and balances that you guys can write down, or, I mean, you have access to this. I did put a new module up with these notes on it. Okay. And I'll hold off on the fifth basic principle of the Constitution for tomorrow, which is federalism. Okay. I'll hit that up. And then we'll do a whole chapter on federalism, chapter 4. Okay, which is a short chapter, but it has good value. You guys know, like, the Supreme Court can declare laws passed by the legislature unconstitutional, actions of the president unconstitutional, and so forth. You guys all know this is Uncle Sam, not Colonel Sanders. Okay. He's over there too. If you walk over there when we're done and you kind of stand over here, he's looking at you. It's one of those. Or if you stand over there, he's looking at you. The way they did Uncle Sam there. Okay, this is yeah. Yeah. That lays it all out. All the checks and balances. Okay. This is a great slide. Thank you to whoever did this. But it just gives you the three branches and what's inside of them, okay? So you get the House and the Senate, you got the cabinet, government agencies, court, Supreme Court, appeals courts, district courts, okay? So Congress approves presidential nominations and controls the budget. Well, the Senate does, okay? It can pass laws over the president's veto, can impeach the president and remove him or her from office. Impeachment, okay? President can veto, okay? Now, the Senate confirms the judicial nominations. So this is the legislator having power over who gets to sit on the court. And the court can declare the laws that they pass unconstitutional. The court can declare presidential actions unconstitutional. And the president gets to nominate judges. But they serve for how long? For life. So the president doesn't have any control over them. The Senate doesn't have any control over them once they take their seat. Okay? They're independent. All right? And so there's your checks and balances, guys. It's pretty simple stuff. All right? So like I said, so let's just recap real quick. Okay? Popular sovereignty, limited government, separation of powers, and checks and balances. Okay? 5 will be federalism, and I'll talk quite a bit about that tomorrow. And yeah, I'll talk about the amendment process, and I think I should be able to push the amendments back to after spring break. We'll study those, and then they'll be fresh in your head when we get to the next test. Okay? Which seems like a daunting task, an essay and 27 amendments. It's not. You guys can handle it. Okay? I'll prep you to get this done. Okay. Have a good day.